Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Yevan David. I'm 16 years old from Sri Lanka. I'm a Formula 4 racing driver in the Spanish F4 series, and I'm living in Dubai.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. We've been covering you for the majority of 2024, and it's been quite a journey for you to get to where you are right now. So do you mind just taking us through what brings you to racing and why do you love doing this?
Well, I started when I was about 6 years old. Me and my dad went to the go-kart track, and we bought a go-kart. We started driving. It was kind of our family thing as well. And for the whole year in 2014, I kept driving, and I just loved it. I had the passion for it. And I've been driving now for the last 10 years, and it's just been my life, really. So it's my heartfelt passion, and that's what I'm happy to continue with.
I do know that one thing that's awesome about the way you've gone about your whole racing career is one is the on-track stuff, which is great because you are learning every time you go out. But even the off-track stuff, you've built quite a fan base around you where people follow and you keep them updated so well. So I was obviously one of those people that stayed in touch with your progress through your reels and all of that. And I got to know that you were born in the UK, but then moved to Singapore, and then you did a bit of international European karting, and then you came back to Asia. How did that go? Walk us through that.
So I've got a pretty complicated life story, but yeah. So obviously my parents are from Sri Lanka, born and raised there. So I'm fully Sri Lankan, but I was born in the UK, in London. I moved out, or my family moved out when I was three, and we all moved to Singapore in 2011. We were living there for the last 12 years until around 2023. COVID meant that I had to go to Europe part time to do racing there, but my family was still based in Singapore, so I was just coming to Singapore like 2 or 3 months of the year, but spending the rest of it in Europe racing. Once COVID died off around 2023, I was able to spend more time in Singapore, but then we had the opportunity to move to Dubai. And so we moved to Dubai in the summer of 2023, and we've been here for about a year now. And that's basically where I've been, but I'm still traveling all the time, still moving around. But it's nice to have a base here in Dubai that's closer to Europe.
That's great. And in terms of your racing career, where did that start? Did you start back home in London, or did you come to Singapore and did you get started there?
So the first ever time I drove a go-kart was in Sri Lanka at the Bandaragama karting circuit. But when I properly started practicing and driving was in Singapore, actually. So in 2014 and 2015 during that period. And then after I started to go to Europe, and each year I went a bit more often out of Asia to Australia and stuff. But it started the very first time in Sri Lanka.
So that's typically your home, right? That's where you got started out. And how often do you kind of go back, revisit those roots of yours?
Well, I have obviously my whole extended family back in Sri Lanka, so I go around twice a year back to Sri Lanka. But I think almost every time I go karting because it's where I started and it feels like home as well. So I do go quite often.
That's lovely. So, help me understand this. I'm also from Southeast Asia. We're from India, which is a much bigger part, obviously. But we one thing that I see that's similar is we don't have too many of us on the international stage. And obviously, you're one of the very small group of people that are representing this entire zone internationally, especially in the West. So, how has that sort of how have you felt representing a country that is probably not so well represented in motorsport, but does have a rich history of motor racing?
It's absolutely lovely. Like you say, we have such a small percentage of drivers from Southeast Asia, let alone Sri Lanka itself. Yeah, I mean, there's probably only about 4 or 5 from Southeast Asia going to F1 right now, and there's probably only 1 or 2 going to F1 from Sri Lanka. But it makes me feel quite special. I think like we obviously stand out compared to the rest of the drivers, and we're able to really represent our nation with such pride. So it's honestly such a good feeling to carry that pride for Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia.
It's amazing. So, how would you compare your journey, for instance? A lot of drivers from this side of the global south, of course, it is, I have been told that it's quite the steep climb for when you come from maybe not so European countries. So how has that journey been for you? Have you felt it a bit a slightly bit steeper than it probably might be for your competitors?
Yeah, obviously we've all been on different journeys, and I think we've all had the different difficulties. But I wouldn't want to compare to too much. But I know that my journey has been very different to theirs, like you say. Maybe not harder, maybe not easier, but basically most of the racing scene is in Europe where they are, and when you're in Asia and living with your family, you do have to travel quite far and sacrifice spending time with family, spending time at school, and getting your work done. So it is quite a big sacrifice, and it is quite a tough journey. But towards the end, you'll see that it does actually pay off. So it is quite worth it.
You did mention moving to Europe quite a bit especially during COVID. You were
Yes.
partly in Europe.
Yes,
That's right.
part time. Yeah.
So did you have a chance of who were you living with if your family was back here? Did you just stay with the team?
Yeah, so basically, 2020 obviously was full lockdown. So I was in Singapore, and January 2021, me and my dad went to Italy because that's where karting mainly was. And after a month, he went back to Singapore with my family, and I basically stayed with my coach in Italy. So from about January to October, I was just living with my coach in Europe. I mean, mainly in Italy, based in Italy, but racing in France, Sweden, Spain, all these different countries. And then at the end of the year, that's when I went back to my family. So it was quite a long year.
Oh my God. You didn't have a chance to meet them in between that year?
No, because, you drive at max, you only get a 2 week break. You're almost driving every week. And at that time, to fly back to Singapore, you had to do 2 weeks of quarantine. So by the time that's over, you don't really get time to spend time with your family. So I couldn't really go back unless we sacrificed the races. So I had to wait until the end of the year. So yeah.
My goodness. How essential was that move to Europe for you? We do know that a lot of drivers do end up shifting base to Europe. But is it absolutely necessary to do that?
It's not. I mean, to an extent, it's definitely necessary. You can still perform and excel in Asia and still make it in the end. But at one point, you do have to go to Europe because you can spend your whole go-karting career in Asia and even maybe F4. But then once you go to Formula 3 or Formula 2, that's all over Europe and at some parts of the Middle East kind of thing. But you're going to be in Europe at one point. Even when you get to F1, you're going to be spending a lot of time in Europe because that's where all the factories are. So it's not necessary maybe in the early stages, but at one point you are going to have to spend a lot of time in Europe, even if you don't live there. So that's basically how it is.
A couple of my friends have told me this, and there's a big difference between the way or the level of competition that you have in Asia versus Europe. Would you mind just touching upon what your experience was? Because now you've done a lot of karting in Europe, a bit of racing right now this season with the Spanish F4. But you've also done a bit of the Middle East Championships, which is predominantly also consists of European drivers. But you've got a mix over there.
Yeah.
So how has your experience been? What has 2024 been like for you?
So the 2024 UAE F4 Championship was actually one of the hardest, I'd say, that we're going to face this year. And the reason is because it's a winter series, none of the European European championships have started yet. So all of the European teams from the best championships like British, Italian, Spanish, all come to race in one championship, which is the UAE. And so that was actually one of the toughest championships there were because the level was so high. But it's different because you can see in UAE that the level is high, but the difference is the whole grid is good. Whereas if you see in Spanish, from what I've seen, the championship has just started. The top level is quite similar to the top level of UAE. There's just less of them. So towards the bottom, they might be a bit more far. But in UAE, it's the whole grid that's close, from what I can tell. And that's basically the main difference. But obviously, it's the first round of Spanish, so easily they could improve as well. But that's how it is this year.
That's very interesting. So, in terms of your routine, the way you train for these championships, is it any different?
There's not much difference between the two. I think I still train the same way. The workouts per week, the sim driving, the mental prep. So it's actually quite similar between the two championships. Yeah.
Walk us through what that generally entails. I know that you're a racing driver. You have to be this. What do you say? You have to have that mix of extreme strength, but also endurance, but not too much muscle mass or weight. So, what is
Exactly.
a racing driver's routine?
Sure. So it's obviously different for everyone, but for me, I tend to run around 4 or 5 times a week. Same with working out, around 3 or 4 times a week. And then pretty much every day, this is 50% for my enjoyment as well. I'm on the sim around 2 to 3 hours a day. Obviously, that could be less sometimes when you have more schoolwork. Yeah. And that's kind of the routine. If you go to school, it might be quite different, but most of the drivers I know and me as well do school online, so you have that time to work as well and to travel, obviously. But that's kind of the routine. It can obviously differ, but it has to stay consistent. So running 4 or 5 times a week, working out 3 or 4 times a week, and that doesn't change whether it's less or more. But that's basically my routine. Yeah.
I like how you mentioned mental prep as well. When you are constantly being shuttled between countries and you have to deal with jet lag and all of that, at the same time you're racing different championships and you might have different cars at some point. How do you train for something like that? Is there a set to-do list in terms of like your mental prep?
Yeah. So when we think of mental prep, I feel like dealing with the jet lag, switching to different cars. Obviously, you have to be mentally ready and prepared for that. But that's more of like the adaptability. So you just have to be good at adapting, which I think comes more from experience. But what the mental prep does help with is being able to really focus and apply for each session and just executing to the maximum, whether it's practice, quali, race, some random test day in the middle of nowhere. It does not matter. Like, you just have to be on it in terms of execution. And that's why mental prep is just so important, because that's what separates the best from the rest.
Absolutely. And I think people underestimate the amount of mental prep that goes on even in the junior categories of racing.
Exactly.
And we're used to seeing, Formula One drivers, wet drivers, they put out their entire routine outside and, they have big teams. But when you come down a little down the funnel, you obviously don't have the biggest team or the biggest of resources to have or build a team around you. How do you manage that? How much of it is self-discipline? How much of it is something that is given to you as a standard operating procedure? Let's call it that.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, when you're quite young, you have to have a bit of guidance, whether it's from your parents or usually from the age of about 12 or 13, you do have a fitness coach, but that's pretty much it. But the self-discipline is very important once you get into your teenage years. Maybe when you're a kid in go-karting, it's more of a bit of fun. You focus at the track. But once you're into your teenage years and you're growing up, you're going through junior formulas, you have to really discipline yourself. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because you have the desire and the motivation to be the best. So you just have to keep working and discipline yourself in that way, and basically use your time wisely. And obviously, F1, they might have a bit more guidance in terms of a mental coach, a fitness coach. You're going to have some help from your parents as well and other people in your junior series, so you can use them as well. But the main thing for sure is having a lot of self-discipline.
You did mention that you have to have something that's pushing you, and that's what brings you into self-discipline. What was it for you? What was your what is your ultimate dream?
Definitely, my ultimate dream is to get to F1. Not only to get there, but to just succeed in F1. I'm quite confident I'm going to be there in the next coming years. But I'm doing everything I want to and can to reach there. So it's not that I have to be there, it's that I want to, even if it's a goal I set when I was 6 or 7 years old. So that is my main goal right now, and that's the only thing I'm really thinking about.
And who was the biggest influence for you through your journey? You mentioned your dad. You do get something from your parents as well. They guide you. Anybody else that you would attribute to?
Yeah, definitely my two parents, and most of all Lewis Hamilton. When I was 6 years old, 7 years old, watching him when, yeah, I'm sure you're a fan too. When he moved to Mercedes and he started winning all those years, obviously he was dominating. But before he even started dominating, when he was in his McLaren days, I just loved him from there. Like I had the inspiration from him, and I just wanted to be like him. He was my role model. So obviously, he's still in F1 now. He probably won't be there by the time I get there, sadly. But he's the one I look up to right now and always have.
You know what's interesting? I know that whenever you put up things on social media, you have the bat sign next to it. What is that? I've been curious to know.
Sure. So a lot of people know about this and are still asking about this because it is quite different from the rest. But when I was around 9 years old, I won my first go kart race back in Asia, and I was wearing a Batman T-shirt coincidentally because it was like a gym shirt, and my mechanic started calling me the Bat, and he said, "This is your nickname now, the Bat." And that basically spread around the whole paddock, and it started going on social media and stuff. So my nickname became the Bat, and the slogan was "The Bat Will Rise." So that's my nickname now. I'm the Bat, and that's basically the story behind it.
Jeez. Oh my God. And I like that it's stuck through all these years.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's similar to like Daniel Ricciardo with the badger. Yeah,
God, that's so true.
yeah.
But, so do you have like a bat sign on your car or something? Or is it just something that you use online?
It is just something online that is kind of like a trend between the people around me. But I do have the bat on my logo, so I have like these T-shirts, these green T-shirts, which will be coming soon to for anyone who wants to know. And they have like a bat symbol on it mixed with my initials, so that's my logo. And maybe not in junior formulas, it can be on the car, but I'm sure when I get to F1, it'll be pretty cool to have that on the car.
Now you're getting me excited about livery designs with the Batman colors or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can go wild with something like that.
yeah. I think it would definitely be a nice meme or a trend in a good way. But we'll see in the future.
Yeah, we will. Just talking about the future, though. I know you're right now in the Spanish F4, and you're just coming off of a really good round one. How happy are you that you were able to debut in points?
Definitely extremely happy. You know, I've been working every day, every week towards my goal, and obviously UAE was actually quite disappointing for me. Not just because I didn't score points, but because I felt like I didn't maximize myself. So I really sat down and started working towards my goal, and this is obviously not the end result. Like there's still more. It's just my first points, but I'm happy to just see that improvement and that we can keep working from here. So definitely very happy and looking forward to the next round to score some more.
How do you mentally shift out of a season that you thought was probably a little disappointing, like you said, and then gather yourself for something much bigger in terms of the visibility and so on, which is the Spanish F4? How do you pick yourself up?
This is a great question because as an athlete, as a driver, I'm sure everyone's been through this, but I've had seasons where I've won a championship. I've had seasons where I've just been nowhere. So there's a big contrast. But the championships where you finish nowhere or where you have a lot of failures, a lot of bad things go wrong, is the ones where you learn the most. And I'm sure everyone has heard this, but that's where you can really pick yourself up. And the way to do it is, it's not defined obviously, but you basically just can't have a negative mindset. You have to stay positive and say that this is not the end. Like there's still more in your career. There's still more that you can learn from, that you can improve. And then you just keep that positive, consistent mind to keep working, to keep improve, see what went wrong and learn from it, so that you don't make the mistake next time, or that you improve next time. And you just keep having that mentality, is saying getting better, getting better, getting better, that at one point, even when you have a down, you're going to get back up because you know how to. So it's just having that positive mindset, really.
That's amazing. I know I know for a fact that Sebastian Vettel, he kept a little tiny black book in which he wrote down everything about the race and he would kind of revisit it. Do you have like a quirk, something that helps you mentally chart out how the weekend went and so that you can kind of learn back from it?
I do kind of write about my weekend in a report kind of style. That's for me to look over, but also for like my coach and my manager to look through as well, so that we can all basically learn, analyze, and improve. Because it's not obviously just me, but it is very helpful for me as well. Usually off track, I also take a lot of notes on how to prepare for the race and just things about the race that I should know and get ready for. So I do have that notebook kind of style, but maybe not after every session, which maybe I should do, but after every weekend, yes.
This is great. I think it kind of it comes under the whole self-discipline realm, doesn't it? Just to be consistent with even the note-taking bit, because you learn so much from it.
Yeah, it really does. Because you can read over what's happened during the weekend, and you can see these details, and then you can, maybe it might not make sense after a race why it goes wrong, but once you process it and see what happened, it makes sense, and then you learn from it. If it's a bad one, obviously. If it's a good race, then you can see what you did right and then know what you do for next time. So it is very helpful in that sense.
Very true. So for the F4 Spanish Championship, once you finish it, and I fingers crossed it goes on really, really well, what's the next step from here for you?
Obviously, it's the middle of the year. It's relatively the start of the season, so plans aren't confirmed yet, but we do have some plans in mind for next year. And whatever it is, it's obviously probably not going to be maybe another year in F4, but it could be. We don't know. It could be F3. It could be something in between, like Formula Regional. But towards the end of the year, we're going to see. And whatever it is, I'm probably not going to stop racing. I'm going to stay on four wheels, and we'll see what I do next year. But as of now, the options are very open.
So I like chatting with sports people and sports generally, because I think there's a sense of uncertainty in their career, no matter how well they do in any sport of their choice, because it's never really laid out for you. It's not like it's an ABC thing. It could be AABBCC. You never know. So how do you deal with something like that? Or are you somebody that has kind of just accepted the fact that this is the way sports works, and I'm okay to not know how my second half of 2024 is going to look? Or are you somebody that's, I need to know, I need to put things into place? How does that work for you?
I did kind of struggle with this before, with having kind of expectations and the unknown. But once I realized is that once you focus on what's in your control and what you can do, whatever happens will work out. Because if you're thinking what's going to happen next time or in a few years, or whether you have the best opportunities, that's out of your control as of the present moment. So if you just focus on what you have to do now and what's in your control, then you'll get there. So that's what I kind of learned, to just focus on what's in your control. And that really helped me with that kind of mindset.
I think that's a very practical, insane way to look at it, actually. This is something that everybody, so me as well, that, there are only so many things you can do. So don't overthink it. Don't think about the things that you couldn't possibly control. And it really helps you stay in the present, in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because being in the present moment is also, you kind of excel in that state, because you don't think of the past or the future. So you're just having no fear, thinking about what you have to do now, and you maximize that.
Absolutely. Now, just a quick question on Southeast Asia, and especially Sri Lanka, Singapore in motorsport. It's only been a couple of years, maybe. Is this your 10th year in motorsport? So you must have finished karting just a couple of years back, maybe 2-3 years ago. So how has the transition been for you in terms of, you are coming from the global south. So how have things been here for you?
So I stopped karting actually last year, so quite recent, in 2023. But the transition has obviously been, it's going to be difficult for everyone. It's been difficult for me, but difficult in a way that it's not holding you back. I mean, you just have to make the transition but maximize it. So obviously you're going from a go-kart, which is quite light, quite a decent amount of power, to a big F4 with aero with on big F1 tracks. So it is very different. It's a different style of driving, but if you have the right practice and the right preparation before, even from yourself, like driving on the simulator and stuff, because you do those kind of things way before you start driving cars, then you're going to be ready. So it was quite difficult for me, but after a few days and a few sessions of driving, I got quite used to it. So it wasn't too bad in the end.
Just a quick note about karting back in Sri Lanka. How is the infrastructure there? How have those formative years in karting between Sri Lanka and Singapore really helped you? Are you seeing any major developments happening?
Yeah, absolutely. At Pearl Bay, Bandaragama in Sri Lanka, they're having more races this year, which is lovely to see. And I'm really happy that that's happening because honestly, the Sri Lankan motorsport is quite big, but big in Sri Lanka. So, but I'm sure if it continues to grow, they're going to start going all over the world. And same with Southeast Asia in terms of Singapore, India, Malaysia. I can see that everything is growing and that there are more drivers going global, which is nice to see. And I'm really happy to see this development in Southeast Asia and especially Sri Lanka.
So I just wanted to clarify one thing. Are you the first Sri Lankan in the Formula 4 or was there somebody before you?
There was someone before, goes by the name Eshan Perez, but I am the first Sri Lankan to race in Europe in F4 because he raced in Asia, actually, in Southeast Asian F4. So, yeah, it's quite a nice achievement, but it's nice to know that there was a couple Sri Lankans before me as well.
And for the kids that are coming up through the ranks in the Global South again, what if you had to backtrack and do something differently that they can probably do here on? What would that be?
I would definitely say to not take things too seriously, because honestly, you're still growing as a kid. Even when you're older, you're still growing in the sport. You're still learning every time, and one failure isn't going to end your career. So you just have to. What I would have said to myself is, don't take things too seriously. Relax a bit, and just have fun when you drive. But obviously, keep working. So that's what I would say.
That's lovely. That's really nice. I think I've come across so many young drivers, even in India, we find ourselves at kart tracks almost every other weekend. And you can see them so worked up over one bad result, like one quality not going their way. And it really takes a toll on them over a period of time. Has something like that happened to you?
There are instances where it's affected me for a while, but I've been reminded by people, especially my parents, that, like I said, to not take it too seriously. But I think if I'd known that back then, it probably would have helped in those moments to improve as well. But there have been instances where I've dwelled on it for a while, and that's okay as well. But it's just how you learn from it. So I've definitely had those times too.
That's lovely. Just a final question from me. We, as a collective society from the Global South, are finally seeing our own kind of drivers come up to the European championships and then finally step up on the podium and so on. What would be like an ideal future for you in terms of your own compatriots, like more Sri Lankans in the sport? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I would definitely love to see more Sri Lankans in the junior series and potentially getting to F1, like not just me. I would love to see it for Sri Lanka. So ideally, I mean, I can't really predict the future and I can't really want anything specific, but just for there to be more diversity in the sport in terms of more drivers from Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. And that's what I would love to see from the sport.
And what do you think would kind of get us there? What do you think that we need to do in order to actually find the next Yevan David, for instance, or a Kushmani or anybody from this side?
Absolutely. Yeah, like you say, there's even Southeast Asian F2 drivers and stuff. And I mean, there was Southeast Asian years ago, Narain Karthikeyan in F1. So I think what the best thing to do for the younger generation is to not force them down that path, but kind of lead them towards it. You know, encourage them, keep working with them, teach them in the right way, and learn from like the people like us who've already done it, and maybe we can help them as well. But basically, just having the right help, choosing the right path, going on the right journey, I think will make them reach to where everyone wants them to be. Of course. Thank you so much for this call. I wish you all the best too.
Thank you.